We are live, sir.
All right, everybody. This is episode 43 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast with your hosts, Brett and CH. Looks like we got some stuff going on with the Fed. We'll talk about that. Also, it looks like our good friends over in Hong Kong might be running out of cash. So we'll touch on that. And also, Nicolas Maduro is looking to see what they can do with the nationalization of their oil production and using Bitcoin in reserves of the central bank, and it's a whole big mess, but an interesting topic nonetheless. But before we get started, man, how you doing this week?
I'm doing good. Again, it's like excuse me, my voice there, I'm losing a little bit. It's like every week you begin and you're like, what's going to happen this week?
Right.
Obviously Bitcoin's going 24/7, but every legacy markets open up, most of them, except for like futures and commodities and stuff like that. They're open Monday morning and stuff closes Friday. It's like, what's going to happen this week? We got Hong Kong, as you mentioned. I don't watch much TV, but when I was, like a month or so ago, when I was able to watch at work, there was very little coverage, I feel like, of the Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has only escalated. I've been mentioning this for a while. It's only escalating. It hasn't been going down. And as you mentioned, there's a video of a catapult being fired.
Yeah, there looks like they're going full medieval on this bitch and launching bricks back. But I mean, it's interesting, one, because the citizens of Hong Kong don't have the Second Amendment to protect themselves against tyranny. And you can see what they're resorting to: umbrellas, catapults, masks, which have now been banned. I mean,
yeah, I saw that banning masks. I mean, this is the insanity they're getting to. Yeah, if you can see the video, yeah, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, that's about as medieval as you get. It's 2019. Don't forget that. We're almost in 2020, and people are using catapults to fight their government. Okay, think about that for a second. It's 2019. It's almost 2020, and we're using catapults. Or not we, but they are. Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. I mean, as I've said before, I don't see this de-escalating until there is a lot of blood. I really don't. I mean, something's going to happen here, whether it's the PLA just marches in one day. But now that the Chinese 70th anniversary is passed, I think they're just going to not give a fuck, to be honest.
They could.
Did you see that the other day? And I don't mean to look a little off topic, but there's that NBA, was it for the Houston Rockets or that GM that tweeted something about China and they're abusing Hong Kong or whatever and taking away their rights, basically. And the league apologized for the tweet to China. They're like, we're apologizing to the Chinese fans. And someone was talking about basically corporations just kowtowing to China, in some sense.
Right. I mean, his comment was pretty much around, we should be supporting the people of Hong Kong who are kind of looking for a democracy, for lack of a better term, and that maybe we shouldn't really be supporting communist China in this case. By we, I guess I mean just anyone who's taken notice to it. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, he got ripped a new one basically, but also I think proved his point where and I saw somebody actually tweet to Mark Cuban, like, what do you think about all this? I guess calling him out about it. Like, you've been awfully quiet. Like, is it worth bowing to, communist China in this case for essentially, I guess, talking shit about what they're up to? Because it's just ridiculous. And, Kyle Bass always rips into this. He can't stand China. The whole thing just sucks.
Yeah. I mean, and there's so much I don't know about China. It's something I'd love to, I need to watch more. I mean, I try to. If you get a chance, Real Vision Finance on YouTube, they have the most phenomenal educational videos when it comes to, I guess, geopolitics and money,
just global
finance.
macro. Yeah.
Exactly, macro. That's a perfect term. The videos are phenomenal. I highly recommend on YouTube. You'll learn a lot. They bring some of the brightest people on there. It's definitely worth it.
You think we should finish up talking about Hong Kong and the ATMs and then jump into the Fed stuff?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking at this point, since we're just ripping into Hong Kong.
Yeah. I was like, all right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just letting it go because I figured at this point we were running all over it. it's getting interesting. And I mean, here's a picture if you're watching, you'd see smashing a front window, well, two front windows actually, to the Bank of China, Hong Kong, it says in parentheses. But it is incredible what's going on here. And, you wonder how much longer can this go on? I mean, as we said, like they're using catapults now, they're banning of masks. It's basically martial law there now. I mean, tourism has dropped to nothing. And I think we mentioned I don't know if we mentioned the podcast, but there is a Zero Hedge article, and it was talking about like hotel rooms are going for like what, $10 a night or $9 a night, some ridiculous amount. Or no, it was some really cheap number. It might have been like $20 a night. But anyways, it was like wow. So that just the tourism's killed there.
Yeah, I mean,
I would
if
go
I
there.
was sent there on a work trip, I'd be like, I'm not really sure I want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some sense it would be cool to like go there just kind of as an independent journalist. Not that I am, but it'd be kind of cool to document it. But at the same time, it's like, do you want to be in Hong Kong when everything gridlocks down and it's chaos?
No, right?
Yeah, it's like, it's really interesting. And there's another interesting thing. This is the weekly local Bitcoin volume. I'll zoom in for people to see that. And it has went bananas at the end of 2019, which is the most recent one up here, in the end of September. So obviously people of Hong Kong are going back into Bitcoin, crypto, and I don't know if, because that was one of the part of the article mentioned here, they're talking about the indication that people are going into, is this another juncture here? Are we going to see Bitcoin rally off this? I mean, as we were talking about, it's up 5.5% this week. So that's not bad. 5.5% and 24 hours into the week. So.
Right. I mean, I think that's a really good point. And I was hoping we were going to touch on the local Bitcoins volume, because although on one hand, I mean, it's not much, right? What it was, a couple of hundred Bitcoin or something like that. We're not talking gigantic numbers, but
there's a limited supply.
Yeah, there's a limited supply in Hong Kong that you can get your hands on for fiat money. And when the Chinese banks have made the maximum withdrawal limit $38 from 1,300 US dollars, like what are you going to do? And I think that's just a really good reminder that any of the money that you have in your bank account is
not yours.
It's seriously an IOU, and you can have your access cut off from your money, which is and that's kind of the question I want to get into, because, for me, that's just such a big point of what makes something like Bitcoin really special, that you can't have your access to your own money taken away from you. And then you see ATMs running out of cash, your minimum withdrawal drops significantly to the point where that you might as well not even have one. And then local Bitcoin's volumes going up. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, as I've said before and we've mentioned, it's not your money. The money in the bank is not yours. I know there's the FDIC that guarantees you $250,000, but reality is the money's not yours. And as they talk about bank run, I mean, think about it. I don't know how many people are at the bank I use currently, but it's like, if even 1,000, let's say they have 1,000 customers, what if 500 people came in that day and wanted to withdraw even just like $1,000 each? How much would that strain them? Do they have 500,000 in cash? You know what I mean?
No, right. I think it would definitely strain them for sure.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I feel like Hong Kong would be our kind of not our first. I mean, there's been bank runs before, right? This has happened before, but I feel like in relatively recent times, like you're actually seeing it slightly. It's not a full blown, tactical assault bank run type style, but it's just people who are being rational, going to the ATMs, trying to take cash out for their own safety, and
because
they're running into issues. I mean,
how long? Yeah, are you gonna get banned? It's because I think they've gotten to that point where I think China's just I don't know, I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure if you get in trouble there, I assume, or they don't like what you're doing, or you're opposing them, you're talking probably a ban and some sort that you can't use your credit or debit card or other payment. I mean, obviously they're in Asia, they're much farther ahead of us. Like in China, they have just like basically the payment apps. They're all on apps. Like what is it? What's that app? WeChat. Yeah, you just pay each other for that. What happens when you get banned from WeChat? It's like Um, it's something to think about. Like same thing with Venmo. It's in PayPal. Obviously, we see it.
Right, people get cut off from PayPal all the
Patreon
time.
too. We see Patreon.
Yep.
It's reality. It's like wow, this is happening. That's what scares me. It's the same thing with seeing doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum, excuse me. Um, seeing people left, right, center, whatever, getting banned or shadow banned or getting their tweets taken down or their videos taken down on YouTube. I mean, it is scary and it's happening right now and no one's doing anything about it. How much farther can large corporations and government inflict this on people before there's some kind of backlash? And backlash, I mean, it's bad, obviously.
Right. I think it's almost like a lot of these huge corporations and even just even the governments that we have, you can see them like in their death throes almost. And I feel like that's weird to kind of say and think, but it's almost too wacky, like some of the stuff you see on Twitter, like the very blatant and obvious shadow banking, the blatant, even pick on Alex Jones for a minute, like shutting down his access to Twitter and even banking relationships. I mean, Gab has been completely cut off from the financial system, and they're just trying to have free speech, open source kind of social media. Like that's the whole point, and they've been completely taken off of the financial system. Like they can't do anything about it. The only thing that they can use is Bitcoin. And they just sent out a huge email today about it to, a million some subscribers to say like, this is pretty much what we have to resort to. Like we have no other options. It's, I think it's a symptom of everything else, everything that we see. It's just so far out of whack that you'd imagine the response back to kind of reality, back to the reversion to the mean. It comes at some point. It's just hard to say what it looks like, either as it's coming after the fact, in the middle of it. Like, there's the other option is it could be a smoother upgrade than you think. Like it really, it depends on where you're located. Like I wouldn't want to be in Hong Kong. I guess it's not so bad being in the US, but like I wouldn't have wanted to be in Paris either for the last year.
Yeah, no, Paris is. I mean, there's still. I'm pretty sure there's still yellow vest protests going on. It's just one of those things. Again, it's not getting coverage, and it just tells you
Right.
it's not getting mainstream coverage. There's if like I'm on Twitter, so I see a lot of this stuff because I follow people who are kind of following all this. But you don't see it in the mainstream media. You don't see them talking about. And here again, you talk about suppression of ideas or revolt, basically, or any. But there's basically revolutions going on right now, and people aren't paying attention. Is what I'm trying to get at, and that's why there's that famous line: "The revolution won't be televised." That's pretty. I think it's pretty true.
Yeah, that's a good quote. It's a good quote. You want to jump into that Fed stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So it's been pretty interesting. Fed's, I guess you could call it QE. I mean, there's no other. The Fed has not bought assets since basically September, October 2014. And I have the interactive chart if you're watching on YouTube. And you can see obviously beginning quantitative tightening in the beginning, end of 2017, beginning of 2018, basically. And we eventually bottomed out, and here we have began quantitative easing again. They're using other terms for it, but it doesn't look that much if you look from here, but it's still a noticeable bump, and it's only from the last 5 weeks. So we've went up from the Fed balance sheet being like 3.759 trillion, which is, the number is not even real. That's an insane number, and we've went to 3.945 trillion, or up about almost 300 billion. In 5 weeks.
That's just such a significant amount. That just seems like
it doesn't
nothing.
seem like much, but think about how much liquidity that is.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot. And I mean, it's there's nothing. I don't know. It's not like it's trending up. It just went straight up.
Yeah, no, I mean
It's not gradual.
It's not gradual at all. I mean, what took, I don't know. Let's see, from basically let's say April to August, so 4 months, has been recovered in 1 month of pumping liquidity, basically. So how quickly did we get back to 4.5 trillion is the question. Are we gonna see 4.5 trillion? I mean, at this rate, think about this. Okay, so let's say in a month they're doing 250 billion. That means $1 trillion new in 4 months.
All right, so tell me this: bullish or bearish for Bitcoin? Then another one
That's a
point whatever trillion back on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve.
I mean, to me, that's bullish because that's liquidity. Now, I could be wrong, but as we've seen for the past decade, you, you know, Bitcoin doesn't exactly correlate with, because Bitcoin's only been born, I guess you could say, if that's a right term to use, it's been around post quantitative easing,
Right.
post the crisis. So is it, what's the best way to put it? Is it just riding along with this experiment, or is it going to separate? And if they keep pumping, inflating, I can only imagine that Bitcoin's going to go up. I mean, the more central banks pump liquidity in the system, the higher we saw Bitcoin's price go. And I think it's more of it's the dollar, it's the yen, it's the pound, the euro losing value against Bitcoin. That's the way people don't look at it like that. But when it's gold, people look at it like that. And it's the same. We'll probably see the same thing with precious metals, where they're just going to start going, and it's not going to. But then again, if central banks don't pump anymore, then we get the deflation. I didn't even want to know what a deflation cycle would be like.
Right. So I think you brought up a lot of good points there. I mean, the biggest one that I need to remind myself of is to think about the dollar just losing purchasing power relative to Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's the same thing as gold, or if you're holding gold or silver.
Right, and I think
real
that's
estate.
that's really the way to think about it. Because if you want to get, I guess, more technical about it, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. All value is subjective. So you're not really concerned with that U.S. dollar value, but it does make sense if the dollar itself is just inflating away and losing its purchasing power over time. And if you have to pump another $1 trillion into the marketplace, every holder of the U.S. dollar becomes impacted by the inflation that eventually works its way back through the system because of the additional dollars pumped into the system. So on one hand, I'd think to myself, all right, yeah, I mean, I know at least in the long term that's bullish. Like you're devaluing the dollar. These currencies are in a currency war, devaluing against each other. And then on the other hand, you have to think, well, they are pumping a lot because things aren't great from an economic standpoint. So that could have its own issues, which could have its own repercussions on Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, as I said before, there's a lot of different avenues here. Is the Fed going to keep pumping? That's the question here. And who else is going to be putting liquidity in the system? Is the ECB, SMB, BOJ, PBOC, you name it. Is anyone else going to be adding liquidity here? I don't know if any of the other banks have charts of this. It'd be really cool. I don't think people realize this. The Federal, if you're ever curious, the Federal Reserve has a really cool website. There's a lot of cool charts, interactive charts that you can fool around with. But this is definitely interesting. I mean, we're going vertical, and as I said before, as you asked about the Bitcoin, is it bullish? And to me it is, but maybe I'm wrong. But I think it's the dollar losing value against Bitcoin, as I said before. Same with the gold or silver, and then here, at the rate we're going, as I mentioned. So what does this mean? January of 2020, we're back at 4.5 trillion balance sheet.
No, but that would be wild.
No,
yeah,
it'd be wild.
No.
And where do we go from there? Do we go to 8 trillion? Does that solve our issues? I don't know. And
right.
If it doesn't work, and equities fall, then what? What do you do?
Right. No, I think that's the big question is what do you do? And I think everybody who's at least taking notice of this is trying to at least play a little bit of defense as best as you can. It's uncertain times. I mean, it is what it is. You have to either stay the course or, buy gold, buy Bitcoin, think of other things that can hedge. It just makes it a really tough time. I don't know one way or another, but
yeah, no,
you have to just it's not even complicated from the standpoint of these things are happening and you need to just pick what you're going to do, or at least be
Have a plan.
aware enough to like have a plan where if if okay, shit really hits the fan, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be, just to make sure. And a lot of that to me has to do with Bitcoin, because a lot of the news that I think comes up is like, of course, people on Bitcoin Twitter are talking about it. So it seems all interrelated. And that's the one thing that's connecting everybody together, which is cool to watch. And then see that validated when Raul puts out a new video and it's like, oh yeah, we were talking about this. So like you have the big global macro hedge fund guys like talking about the same thing that Bitcoiners are talking about, and everyone's like on the same page.
I think
it's funny watching
across the spectrum, whether you're talking Bitcoin, the gold people, the Austrian economists, then obviously the macro. Everyone's kind of starting to align here, like what the fuck is going on? But obviously, it's a very small percentage. Like you think about FinTwit, it's a very small percentage of Twitter. And
totally.
then in terms of the population and what people are thinking about, I think most people right now in America, it's big. If obviously people are interested in football, like that's what's big right now, like college football and NFL. Right. But here I am sitting and like we're on the verge of just the most something big's happening. So I don't know what, but something we're not like. The last few years, the markets there's just been absolute insanity in every market. It doesn't matter what and you got to wonder, are we going to, as people keep saying, melt up, or is this it? And if this is it, it's like the fucking backside's going to be fucking terrifying. And I emphasize that for a reason. It is not going to be friendly. It'll be interesting to see where that takes us.
Yeah, and I think all of it's just such a good topic, to roll into the last topic about, I saw an article about Maduro hoarding Bitcoin, and when you see an entire country like Venezuela also get...
Dude, that might have been the smartest move ever. I mean,
what?
How many, you gotta wonder how much Bitcoin did they buy, and what's a 5x to $100 million, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because all of a sudden you're getting the use case of Bitcoin. You have an entire country, although a terrible one, being completely just isolated from the financial system, trying to use whatever it can to get itself back into the financial system through looks like their nationalized oil company somehow found its way to get to accumulate some Bitcoin. My guess is they seized a ton of mining equipment and have been mining it, if I had to guess. And they've also
that would be pretty smart, to be honest.
I heard a story. Yeah, I mean, I heard a story that people who would, I guess, be working for Maduro will go and print bolivars and then use local Bitcoins to accumulate Bitcoin with freshly printed money, which is actually pretty ingenious. Like you have to do that until you get away with it, I guess. But it's just almost insane to see that there's demand, I guess, for an alternative financial system. And they have also thought about switching to the Russian alternative of SWIFT because they need a way to sell their oil and to pay. I mean, it's just basic economic stuff. It's just basic stuff. But you can see that there is demand for an alternative system, one that is apolitical, even like into the gold standard, just of trying to trade internationally.
And we're close, dude. I mean, think about the average fiat currency lasts 45 years, and the U.S. dollar, which was the Bretton Woods system, collapsed in 71. So the fiat currency basically has been since 71, because prior to that, everything was pegged to the U.S. dollar, which was pegged to gold. But you sent me that tweet earlier, and this is back to Hong Kong, just about it says China banks are running out of cash in Hong Kong dollar and the U.S. dollar. Maximum withdrawal limit dropped from $1,300 U.S. dollars to $38 U.S. dollars, a drop of 34 times. And then it says China financial doomsday is coming. The dude tweets it's from Hong Kong, so that's why it's kind of choppy English. But just getting back to that earlier, that's absolutely insane. But think about if you went to your bank and you couldn't pull out $38 in cash, or $39 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be pissed.
No, people would riot. I mean, you would just be like, what, if you went to the ATM, there's yeah, and it's like how, and the question is how long can the U.S. stay immune to this? I mean, the U.S. is already, politically, we see the two sides very differently, but obviously very, not trying to get into politics here, but there's a very, between the left and right now in America, there's a very big divide, or at least the very far left or whatever. So it's interesting to see what does this mean for 2020 in the U.S. and is the U.S. immune to all this going on? And I don't think it is.
Right. And you kind of have to let that play out and see. And it's getting to be that time. And it's funny that there's so much going on globally that makes it even more interesting this time around, especially as everyone's feeling more uneasy just about the global economies in general, right? So it seems like we're teetering a bit, which, isn't a warm, fuzzy feeling.
No, it's not. It's like how much changes, here shortly. Like,
Yeah.
how close are we to shit hits the fan? Because 2008, like that happened really quickly. Or 2007 and 2008, and I think the system's even more fragile now than it was before. It
Yes.
hasn't gotten more resilient. So it's is it gonna be
No.
is it gonna be a matter instead of I mean even in 2008 though, I mean, like I know, like, it was the markets were going down for basically the year. You can look at it here. That was the quarterly sticks. They started going down in October of 2017, or the third quarter of 2007, excuse me. But it's like how long will it take this time for us to, like, before things just seize up like they almost did in 2008, where banks weren't going to lend to each other on a Monday. I think we're getting there. I mean, that's what I feel like, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, it's felt like that for a year almost already.
Yeah, dude,
But
it's like it's every time, dude. Like, okay, to be honest, like when
everything takes
dude,
longer
December
than you
2018
think.
last year,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, we're done. Like, I was like, there
Yeah, so
goes.
was I.
I mean, but like when you looked at it, it was like everything was done. It was over. It was like, see ya.
No, I thought the same thing. And that just it's a good reminder that um I'm ready to be wrong the majority of the time about these kind of things. And things always take longer than you think.
Yeah.
So maybe in the grand scheme of things, maybe the problem is being too early, which is also the same as
Oh, yeah.
being wrong, right? So like
Exactly.
I understand that that's the case. You can be right, but have to wait, however long until you're proven right, and you could have lost everything by then anyway. So you're wrong, and being early and being wrong are the same thing in this example. So it's like it's very humbling to see how long some of this plays out, and maybe it's because we've been watching it for too long, and
Yeah, well,
it's
we've
like
been in it.
you think everybody realizes it, and
No,
nobody
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 does.
really
It's not
does.
a big
Yeah.
deal yet. No,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal yet, but it will become one. Like, I don't know. What's become one of my favorite guys is Northman Trader.
Yeah,
I
I
really
do
like
like
his
him as well.
analysis.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what he said. And did you want to touch on something else too? Was there one more thing? Oh, you already touched on the Maduro. That was
Yeah. No, that was pretty much everything. With that, it's just, it, I think it's a nothing story, honestly. It's too early for it to really mean anything. But I think the point that it happened and that, there's a good chance that the Venezuelan government is sitting on Bitcoin. It's almost too early to do anything with it, right? I think this would be interesting 5 years from now, or even 2.5 years from now. It might be even more interesting. And I'm sure they're going to hang on to it. So we'll know more what that looks like in 2.5 years or 5 years. But it's just great proof of the actual use case. Like, it's a common saying, Bitcoin's for enemies. Because the point is you should be able to trade it with your enemy. And, you can just use it. It's just a tool. It'd be like sending your enemy an email and having it sent back. It's just a piece of technology that you can use. It's like that public infrastructure almost. Um, so that's like a little mind blowing when you really step back and think about it.
It's gonna. It's one of those things where it's it's a whole new technology, as Andreas Antonopoulos has talked about. It's completely different, and it's still in its infancy, and who knows what it'll be in 10 years.
Right.
Just like we've mentioned before, numerous times, is the internet. I mean, the internet in 1993 was nothing, and emails, as I've mentioned before, emails like sending attachments was a big deal, being able to do it in
Right.
the 90s, and now you think about where we are, and people are Snapchatting, people are live streaming on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it.
You can airdrop a 4K video now, and you couldn't attach like a
A picture.
1 megabyte
Yeah,
like picture. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so
No, but it's a good point, and it's a good reminder. Some people who've been using maybe mobile web or technology, cell phones, and the internet, you just have like no appreciation for how shitty using the internet was at first, and you
mhm.
know, just even it took a long time for emails, like the average person to send an email, and then it took a long time for the average person to send an email from their phone.
Oh
Like
yeah,
there was also a gap between
oh yeah, huge.
computer and then like even just the BlackBerry movement, like getting into BlackBerry
Yeah,
and then out of BlackBerry into applications. It took years to go from being able to like first send email on your phone to a baby boomer requesting Uber on their smartphone. Like it took some fucking time. Um, so I don't know. Maybe that just means shit's going to take longer than I think. But I think since it's kind of exponential technology on top of exponential technology, it ends up happening faster the next time around. Everybody's already on. You've onboarded billions already just on their mobile phones. So like that's a great head start.
yeah.
They had to they had to get fucking routers in people's homes first this time around, or even like laying out when the switch from 56K to like FiOS, like fiber optic, like they literally had to lay the wire to
Mm.
get, you know what I mean? So like a lot of shit had to happen.
Oh yeah,
Now it's
so
all
much.
wireless. So, I mean,
Yeah, I'm a
it
big
just,
fan of LAN though. It's better than
yeah, I
Wi-Fi.
know, right?
I'm also curious about the Wi-Fi. Like as you know, I don't mean to get into any conspiracy here, but the 5G thing, with having those cell towers every corner basically in metropolitan areas or anywhere basically. I don't know. Kind of. I mean, where you live, it's probably gonna be more prevalent, and I think bigger cities, obviously, it's gonna become really prevalent shortly. Like we're almost there. I feel like the infrastructure is being put out.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of technology is pretty close, and it'll be interesting to see what, if any, implications or I guess side effects of 5G is. I've heard everything, right? On one hand, it's like not so great, can enable some not so great things, and on the other hand, it's like, yeah, it'll be. I'm sure the 3G guys were pissed when 4G was coming out, and
Yeah.
trying to make the switch. So I get it, I guess. But even something like that, assume that there's zero side effects. Even that itself is now another exponential technology where you're like streaming gigs, no issue
Yeah, it's
over your
ridiculous
cell
what it's
phone.
gonna be now.
Like that's really awesome. I mean, it's crazy having that kind of power and speed. And it's weird because I'm sure that will feel slow, like in another decade or 20 years or
Yeah,
something. It'll be like, wow,
yeah.
I don't know.
It's gonna get things like people don't realize. Like I keep mentioning to people, like we're going into a whole new decade. Things are going to change. I mean, you think back to 2010 and how much has changed now. Um, whether you're talking macro technology, you name it. I mean, Snapchat wasn't a thing in 2010. It was Instagram wasn't a thing. Twitter was a fucking baby. Facebook obviously was a big thing in 2010, but still, you think about um, how much things have changed. It's and so what's next? That's a good question.
Right. No,
And since I'm such a pessimistic person because of the way that the central banks keep going with their monetary policy, it's like The longer this goes on, the worse the whatever comes after. I don't know what comes after. I think personally, I lean towards war. I think war is inevitable at this point. People think we're done with war. People think we're past major wars with lots of civilian casualties, and I think history's just going to prove us wrong again. You know, and I feel like you just see the pieces already aligning on the map. I mean, you could see, obviously the BRIC nations, but Russia. I guess you can't really include Brazil because Brazil's now Trump and Bolsonaro talking. But like you look at Russia, Iran, China, and you can include like Syria, and then look at the NATO side of things, the U.S., Britain, Germany, etc. Where are the pieces going to fall, and is NATO even a thing anymore? Too, is NATO going to disseminate over the next decade? And then on top of that, the European Union, I think, is done. I don't think that thing makes it to 2030. I don't see in any way that the EU can survive its current circumstances.
Yeah, at the very least, I don't think the euro will survive the 2030s. And then, from there, hopefully everybody gets a chance to take their respective country back and, do with it what they would prefer to be doing, which is, I'm assuming, being free and having access to sound money, just as everyone would enjoy having if their region allows it. Well, but yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, culturally, Europe is like screwed itself right now. I mean, they've, the people who are originally from that land, do their, and I know immigrations, but it's just become an absolute disaster there. And I saw a pretty funny video. I don't know if you saw it the other day. There's like some off-duty metropolitan police officer that was in one of their train cars, riding around London, I think it was, and there's some like smaller, I think they said from Afghanistan, some younger guy threatening people with a knife, and the dude ended up just headbutting the dude one time, and the dude just fucking dropped on the metro car. People just started clapping. It was like, and I don't mean to get into this stuff, but it's pretty interesting what Europe did with their immigration policy, and just overloaded the country with a bunch of people that just couldn't assimilate. It's not even possible what they were trying to do. You're taking people from completely different cultures and throwing them into a mix, and you've obviously now seen the damage of it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But again, as I've said before, like a lot of these countries have walked themselves in the corners. It's like, do you let all these immigrants take over your culture and just vote you out, or do you revolt back and whatever? It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. And this is a big macro thing. This might take another whole decade to play out, but it's going to happen. It's
right. No, I think that's a good point. That I feel like I feel like I'm the early guy. Like I'm always early on this stuff or wrong. So it's like, if this is just the beginning cracks of that, then in hindsight, 10 years from now, I'll be like, oh, remember when we were talking about this in 2018 and 2019 and you saw blah, 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 blah. Then I'll look back and say, okay, I was early, obviously. But it's just not a coincidence. I think, you're seeing the same story kind of globally, and the money and just the central banking infrastructure globally. And, everybody's got the same system. You have a central bank, and then you can just do whatever you want after that, right? You just need to get that part in there first, and you're kind of good as a nation state to go and fund whatever you want to fund. Same business model, every country has it. Doesn't look like it's sustainable because if you have the option to print, you're going to print, and it's hard to resist that temptation. Eventually, somebody will do it, and that experiment is kind of coming to an end. And I don't wonder if what we see today are symptoms of that. I don't know. That's just my last two Satoshis on that.
No, that's a good point. I think we're as we keep talking about, we're so close to this. There's something major is happening, and there's that guy, I think Liberty Blitz or whatever, on Twitter. He talks about we're going through one of the most interesting periods in time, and I think a lot of people aren't realizing what's going on. I mean, like, I think the perfect example is you have Donald Trump, the president of the United States, tweeting all the time the most, the most insane things, But it's just, but you think about it, technically the most powerful person in the world, whatever you want to say it, but it's just funny. I did that in quotation marks, powerful person in the world, because there's people behind closed doors who do a lot too. But it, from a normie standpoint,
right? Sure.
Yeah, it's the best futures trader to ever exist, Donald J. Trump. Dude. Someone was mentioning that there's no restrictions against those guys at all, like anybody in the White House. So like, who knows?
Oh yeah.
People don't think,
Pump your bags.
a couple percent's not a big deal, but like when you own thousands and thousands of shares of a company, or are long or short, or can buy options, it's a big deal when you have lots of money to move. A couple percent doesn't. There's a lot, So
right.
I just laugh at it. I think it's funny. We just speculate on a bunch of random stuff like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably a good way to wrap it up, but we'll definitely be recording another episode probably tomorrow night, and this whole week is going to be interesting. I don't know if we mentioned Powell's talking. Powell talked today. I don't know if that was a huge cause for the market to fall off at the end of the day, but it'll be interesting. He's talking again tomorrow, I think at 2:30 or something Central Time.
Yeah. Or
Eastern Time. I think he's talking 1:30 Central, 2:30. And then he's talking again at 10 a.m. Central Time. So 11 Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. So it'll be interesting to see where this plays out. Whenever he speaks, he just screws everything up. Dude. You just turn, if you want to have fun, just turn on like a low time frame chart and watch the market when he starts speaking. It doesn't. The algorithms have no clue to do. So funny. It's a scary time.
But yeah, this was that's a good way to wrap it up. This was episode 43 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, leave us comments on YouTube, send us DMs, let us know what you want us to talk about. Thanks for checking out this week's episode.
Yep,
Peace.
Thank you.